Hi, everyone. My name's Jeannie Zames. I'm Director of Marketing at BillingPlatform, and I'm excited to be leading or moderating the webinar today. We're doing a webinar on 4 reasons building your own billing system won't work. I know I've been in this scenario more than once with other software programs, and there's always the build versus buy question that comes up. So I think you'll find this to be a very interesting presentation. I do want to remind everybody that we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, and just submit any questions you have using the chat functionality on the GoToWebinar tool. And now I'd like to turn things over to Brian Dingman, who leads our team of solutions consultants, and he's going to be taking you through the webinar. Brian?
Easy for you to say, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Brian Dingman, as Jeannie mentioned, and I do lead the solutions consulting team here at BillingPlatform. Previously, I've worked at companies like Salesforce and Aptus. Been doing this for about 20 years across multiple verticals. Really have had quite a bit of experience working with different companies in different spaces. And so hopefully, and actually, believe it or not, to start my career, I actually built an internal billing system at a financial services company. So I've been around the block a little bit too long, probably. Quite a bit of experience in here. In terms of agenda, just real high level, we're going to talk a little bit about building versus buying and that dilemma. Some of the costs associated with building a solution. Some of them maybe aren't as well known as folks might have understood. And then we'll talk about 4 areas where building your own application can be problematic and how BillingPlatform's modular platform approach is better. So with that, let me hop right in and talk a little bit about, the building versus buying dilemma. So, maybe you're just getting started, pre-revenue company, or you might even been around for a long time. It doesn't really matter. No matter how big or small you are, you're going to have this time in your professional career where you're going to ask, should we build this or should we buy this solution? And today we're going to be talking specifically about billing, but this topic is pretty relevant in the software industry in general, whether it's CRM or just about any type of software that a company would use in-house. And as I mentioned, early in my career, I worked in-house on software, and we really built everything. And a lot of that was due to the lack of off-the-shelf applications. And so we've come a long way in the last 30 years, being able to have these options. It's quite beneficial to everybody involved. So some of the reasons, we hear for building your own solution are things like, there's not a solution in the world that could handle our complexities. I have complete control over every aspect of the application. I'm unique, basically. Variations on that can be tailored specifically to our business processes. We're the only ones who do things like this. Other ones are, we have great resources in-house that can build this. Off-the-shelf solutions are too rigid. Buying might not be able to meet every single need that we might have. And, finally, my favorite of all is I just love Excel. And so, those are kind of recurring themes, but the reality is will building your own billing solution give you a competitive advantage? Honestly, that's the real question to be asking. So not so much is this what we're doing unique, but is going ahead and building this billing solution going to give you that competitive advantage? And if it's not, the answer is probably no. So whether you're small or large, building a solution isn't cheap, and it takes time and resources. Many people also don't really adequately consider the ongoing maintenance costs. The estimates on this slide that you see, I actually think they're really on the low side, the conservative side, and we do that on purpose. I think it's much like an ROI calculator, where we're always going to do things a little bit more conservatively. Just anecdotally, I was talking to, now this is a large enterprise customer, said that they were spending over $800,000 a year just to support their current in-house billing systems. Yes, systems, meaning more than one, which is another common theme here. As you grow, you tend to acquire additional billing systems. So looking at these numbers and then talking about building, let's say you're successful, you're okay with the money. Then the question becomes, what about production support, for example? I started early in my career. I mentioned I worked on systems in-house. I also did production support, and it is not glamorous. And we had a revolving door. People, developers especially, they really want to work on new software and use new technologies. This puts companies in situations where nobody is left who is intimately familiar with the design. Even if it's really well documented, you have this kind of one-man down rule, one guy who really has all the information. And if he leaves, all your documentation, kind of understanding of how that comes together, walks out the door. And that's a problem that you don't want to be left in. And then finally, what happens if your business changes? What happens if you acquire a company? Very common, you want to monetize a different way, these homegrown applications that you designed around original business process, you're left basically having to start all over again. And maybe not start all over again, maybe just have to significantly re-architect. And so it's constantly evolving. So, it's not just maintenance and kind of one-time costs. You might end up having to do this all over again. And then I guess I mentioned previously too, what if there's, multiple billing systems? And so these costs exponentially skyrocket. And it's not uncommon talking to large enterprise companies where they've gotten to a point where they have 13, 14 plus billing systems. They're having to support and maintain all of those. So with all these costs in mind, I guess, I go back to the original question, does it really make sense to develop your own application? Is this providing you a competitive advantage? I believe it is not, especially in the billing space. Let's take a closer look at the 4 areas where building your own application can be problematic and how BillingPlatform approach is much better. Let me build this slide out for you. One of the things that's kind of underestimated, especially within billing, is just how much functionality is in the billing system. A lot of people just think of invoicing and sending an invoice to the customer, but there's a lot more to it. And I think previously we had discussed all the reasons, why you might want to build a billing solution. Here you begin to see a lot of the reasons why you shouldn't. There's a lot of common functionality. BillingPlatform itself offers everything you need for recurring revenue management, and we do it through what we call our agile monetization platform. More of an industry term, but I think it's pretty applicable in terms of what we can do and how we can quickly monetize different products and solutions. So when you look at billing, there's a lot of kind of common things that are out there, and just talk about having to build all these. Things like support for complex account hierarchies. You might need to do consolidated invoicing, for example, to multiple sites or locations. We also provide a fully featured product and packaging catalog with 14 different rating types, from subscription to discount to usage to formula, etc. Robust and high volume invoicing engine with pixel perfect template reproduction. Omni-channel order management that can orchestrate purchases from CPQ, ERP, e-commerce, or even a kiosk. Contract lifecycle management to handle your customer specific pricing terms, uplifts and ramps. And then finally getting into some of the accounting capabilities, deep financial management capabilities for managing accounts receivable through integrated payment gateways and lockbox files, full subledger capabilities, including configurable revenue recognition rules and transaction classification for GL integration. What about a self-service customer portal for customers to access and pay invoices? You might not even have thought about functionality like that for customer-facing capabilities. And then point-and-click wizards for report and dashboard creation. Likely, if you're going to do it internally, you're going to use some other third-party solution to do reports and dashboards, but you still need to account for being able to do that. Even if you've already paid for that solution in another department, it's still additional data that you're bringing in, and it's functionality that you have to account for. And then finally, subscription management for prepaid, postpaid, and subscription with overages. There's a lot in there. We just kind of scratching the surface in terms of kind of basic functionalities. BillingPlatform delivers all of that on a modern cloud platform, completely wrapped in SOAP and REST APIs. And so as we talk a little bit more about other aspects in terms of, down the road in terms of integration, those are also things you have to keep in mind, is that integration is going to be a huge part of billing, and making your application accessible via APIs can be very important as well. So monetization models change over time. We're seeing a shift away from the all-you-can-eat, one-size-fits-all subscription model to subscriptions with overages and pay-as-you-go consumption models. Just think about MoviePass, our favorite company. They had your all-you-can-watch movie subscription. They're not in business anymore. And so if you're looking at billing solutions today, honestly, consumption-based monetization is a must-have requirement. To support consumption-based monetization, you need a mediation and real-time rating engine. BillingPlatform offers the industry's only, and I mean truly only, high-volume integrated mediation and rating engine that allows you to create complex monetization strategies around consumption and subscriptions with consumption. So even in the off-the-shelf monetization space, many of the providers require a third-party product for mediation. So something to be wary of as you evaluate vendors. Nothing like having to call yet another company when you need support, or it could be worse even. It could be having to kind of roll your own solution that has to mediate five or six different sources maybe. Mediation and real-time rating as you move into consumption are things that we take for granted, internally. I think a lot of customers don't necessarily think about it I know in the landscape of other solutions on the market, like I said, they've had to use third-party solutions to do this. You get into high volume as well, and it becomes even more complex. High volume, I'm talking, 26 million records a month, for example, or line items, I should say. Those are real considerations as the business grows. But just in general, thinking about subscriptions and growing beyond subscriptions, you're going to need some type of usage, some type of mediation layer, and some type of rating engine. As stated at the outset, one of the major reasons for building your own solution is rigidity and lack of control in off-the-shelf applications. We hear this all the time. We're unique, we're special, we do things this way, nobody else can do it this way. We want to have full control. What about having the best of building and buying? And that's really where BillingPlatform comes in. It has a lot of very unique capabilities, and one of them is this business process management layer. So it's also referred to as a workflow layer, but it's a declarative workflow engine that gives customers the power to build company-specific business processes all through a point-and-click interface. So things like needing to set up a complex approval process for a specific segment of customers based on a monetary threshold. I see this come up all the time. Can't approve an invoice, needs to go through this process. How do we do this? Maybe you just want to call out to your provisioning system if a customer is delinquent by 90 days. Maybe you just want to email somebody. Maybe you want to have a sequence of events that happens if somebody goes delinquent by 90 days. All of that point-and-click configuration. What about sending a notification to an account holder who might own, or excuse me, account owner, excuse me, who might want to know when their contract's being expired by 90 days, 60 days, and 30 days. All of that's capable, and it's all point-and-click, and it can be done through wizards within BillingPlatform. These are just some of the examples, scratching the surface. We've done everything from applying credits to integrating with payment gateways, doing payment retries. Those are actually part of the out-of-the-box solution. And so we use our workflow layer, part of the application functionality. And so it's constantly evolving, it's constantly being upgraded, and it's constantly up to date. Not many homegrown billing solutions have a full-fledged BPM workflow layer as part of it. Maybe you can buy one and add it on, but even if you did, it's not something that's being constantly innovated by a third-party company over and over multiple times a year to give you additional functionality. Continuing on the theme of having the best building and buying kind of solution, let's talk a little bit about extensibility of the data model and some of the integration capabilities. When you talk about billing in general, integration is probably the most important part, whether it's CRM, ERP, payment gateway, homegrown system, provisioning, you name it. We're having to talk to all these different systems, either upstream, downstream, and then if we're dealing with usage and consumption, we're having to deal with all of those, maybe metering systems, SQL Server database, all of those things, either upstream or downstream, that really require us to have flexible and open integration. One of the things that I will say universally, our customers need to be able to add new fields and entities to the application. So just about every implementation we've done and our customers have continued to maintain after we've delivered it to them has had the need to have not only customization of fields and entities, but also workflow. Some examples of that are things like a purchase order, right? You have a purchase order that you need to draw down from with each invoice. You have your purchase order total amount, you have your purchase order consumed and purchase order remaining that are going to be formula fields, for example. And based on those fields, you're going to be able to do different types of workflow off of there so that if you get to a certain threshold of purchase order remaining, you're going to have some actions take place. Maybe the invoice can't even close based on that. That's just one example of extending the data model to support a new custom object in purchase order, some custom fields in those purchase order remaining, purchase order consumed, and purchase order total amount fields. And you can get much more robust. We have customers with multiple purchase orders open. We have invoices going against multiple purchase orders. And so all that can be handled through extension of the data model. But maybe you just want to keep track of, purchase price for goods over time. Really common thing that we see for revenue recognition purposes. You have a cost of a good, it changes over time, and you need to keep track of it and use it as part of a revenue recognition rule. Having it all built into the same platform, having revenue recognition all part of the same platform, and not being a third-party product really gives us the ability to have a tightly integrated platform, provides a lot of benefit besides just being able to extend the data model beyond what is, say, out of the box, for example. And then finally, as I mentioned before, creating formula fields. What if you just want to, do something quick like calculating a customer's lifetime value or determining a day's sales outstanding. All of these are quickly done, and done through really a point and click demonstrable interface that allows you to expose the entire data model in what we call our formula builder. And you'll see that throughout the application, we have a consistent formula builder. Finally, you can use Billing Platform to easily extend the data model and create new fields with a few clicks. Best of all, these extensions are immediately available for reporting and API access. So, we talked about API access earlier, and why it's so important. One of the things that, if you're doing this in-house, you're going to have to build those APIs. And, it's just another piece of integration, another piece of maintenance. It's just something that I think it's thought about, but maybe not exposed, and the way Billing Platform works is as soon as you add those fields, as soon as you add those entities, they're automatically available. We have a CRUD-based API that gives you full access to all those methods and fields immediately after they're available. With Billing Platform, you can meet the needs of today and the future through our modern platform architecture. This allows you to focus on innovation, honestly, and not about maintaining a bunch of servers or patching them with the latest security update. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Q&A section.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. That was very informative. We do have a few questions. And again, just a reminder, if you've got questions, submit them using the chat feature on GoToWebinar. Our first question, when looking at external software tools, I'm always concerned about integration and compatibility with our existing tech stack, which includes both internal and external tools. How do I make sure that that isn't an issue?
Oh, that's a great question. Compatibility, internal, external tools, that's really one of the sweet spots within Billing Platform. And it's something, whether you're looking internal or going to build yourself, or looking at off-the-shelf vendors, it's a great thing to be evaluating, number one. And number two, just kind of talking a little bit about Billing Platform. As I mentioned, our APIs, they're all REST and SOAP based. Our application actually uses those APIs for all functionality within the application. So there's really nothing within the solution that isn't available via API. And then, as I mentioned before, if you add any extensions, you're creating new fields, you're creating new custom objects, they're all available through the APIs. We also have a bunch of different ways to integrate with third-party systems, from bulk loading tools, as well as using ETL tools that are on the market that are pretty consistent. In terms of Billing Platform, I think it's something that is really in our sweet spot.
Great, thanks, Brian. We've got another question, another hot topic, scalability. Scalability is always a question for us in both build and buy situations. Do you have any advice or helpful hints for being able to outline those kinds of growth requirements before they actually happen?
Another great question. Some really good ones today. So one of the things I will say is that scalability is very unique. The number of customers that I talk to, who are prospects, I should say, the number of them who anticipate massive growth, being able to account for that is pretty fundamental. In terms of Billing Platform, our architecture is very modular and scalable in terms of both as an infrastructure as a service, using a very scalable platform, as well as being able to modularize the components. So for example, let's say you're doing 600-page invoices. We can separate the invoice generation tool, we'll call it a service in this case, microservice, and move it off to another server, for example, if we need to scale out or scale up, or we increase the number of threads. So in terms of how we go about scalability is we plan for 3 to 5 years. So we work with all of our customers to understand their growth requirements from a 3 to 5 year requirement perspective, and size accordingly to that before we even get them set up. And then obviously we can continue to grow and scale even if they grow beyond those targets through the modular and scalable infrastructure of our application.
Great, thank you, Brian. Here's an interesting question. Is your solution Billing Platform only cloud-based, or do you also have an on-premise option as well?
That's a great question. We are 100% cloud-based. Higher level discussion of it, it's a multi-tenant architecture, so all of our customers share the same resources.
Very interesting. All right, I think we've got time for one more question. This is one we actually hear from a lot of customers and prospects. Our products and services catalog is so complex. I'm always concerned that an off-the-shelf option just won't meet all of our needs and that we will need to build some sort of custom solution anyway. How do we avoid making that mistake up front when we're looking at off-the-shelf solutions?
Products and catalog services are really complex, yeah. I think this kind of goes back to the recurring themes we hear over and over, is that everybody believes that their business is very unique and very specific to them. And the way, Billing Platform in general designed the product architecture and catalog architecture, I'll say, and it goes into bundles as well, is that the products are designed independent of pricing, independent of rating methods, and all three of them come together through a very, I want to say, multi-pronged approach. So in terms of determining which price we're going to use, we're going to look at a customer contract, we're going to look at a product definition, we're going to look at a number of different places for a rate, and then finally we're going to look at the product definition to determine how it's being rated. And that's where I go back to our 14 kind of out of the box rating methods. So whether it's a usage-based product, whether it's a discount product, whether it's a tax product, all of these different types of products will have their own definitions, and some of them can even be, as I mentioned, formula-based. So we can have things like a minimum commitment, for example, that can be basically one product that can be delivered to every customer with just using one SKU, I'll call it for lack of better terms, but one product definition of minimum commitment that can be delivered to every customer based on different tiers and based on different threshold amounts. And that's really part of our dynamic product definition module.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. Well, it looks like we're at the end of our time. So again, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. And we will be contacting and sending each of you the recording and the presentation. So again, thanks for your time. And again, thanks, Brian, for your helpful and knowledgeable information. And everybody have a good afternoon. Thanks.